Hello and welcome. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram.
And I'm Angela Joy, Evolving Enneagram Faculty.
If you've been seeking a compassion-based, contemplative approach to Enneagram-informed transformation, you are certainly in the right place. This is where contemplation meets the Enneagram. We're in week 4 of a 12-week Sunday talk series based on the theme Evolving Toward a Unifying Vision. The specific theme for last week and this coming week is meeting the moment, reacting versus responding. Today's talk is entitled Enneagram Conflict Styles and the 90-Second Rule. So we're going to take this talk in 3 parts. We'll begin with Angela sharing the parable of the knotted shoelace. Then I'll launch in with the 3 Enneagram conflict styles. And then Angela will close us off with a 90-second rule and a deactivation practice. So ready? Let's begin.
I'd like to open with the parable of the knotted shoelace. There was a little girl who loved to wear her keds to go out and play. In a hurry to get with her companions, she would sometimes tie her shoelaces improperly. While they would often come undone at play, they ended up in a tangled knot when she came back thereafter. The more she struggled with the knot, the knottier the shoelace got. The girl often considered cutting the knot with a pair of scissors. Seeing the little girl struggle, her mom would often come to the rescue and patiently untangle the knot. Seeing the ease with which her mother untied the lace, she asked her mother for the secret. Her mother's wise reply was, "My child, all you need to do is look at the knot with different eyes." I'll bring in Nhien to show 3 different lenses through which we filter and respond to conflict or situations in which our needs are not getting met.
All right, thank you, Angela. So part 2, I'm going to launch into like an overview of what we call the harmonic triad in the Enneagram, also known as the conflict styles of the Enneagram. So I'm going to share the 3 conflict styles with just a little bit of commentary about the specific types within them, starting with the first triad, which is the emotional realness triad. That's types 4, 6, and 8, also sometimes called the expressing triad. And that additional language comes from Sandra Smith, who comes from the narrative tradition of the Enneagram. So, what is the emotional realness triad like? Well, these folks tend to respond to conflict by expressing their feelings and reactions openly, looking for emotional mirroring from others. These types tend to be strong in like authenticity, the ability to support like really depthful processing of challenging events, which, our modern world here today is just filled with challenging events. The If unchecked, this type can get caught in a never-ending sort of loop of expressing emotions without coming to a solution. So again, some of the gifts is like depth and authenticity, but some of the challenge can be that looping of staying in the negative feelings. And then overemphasizing negative feelings can result in others feeling overwhelmed or others becoming even dismissive of those people because of the overemphasis in terms of negativity. So I want to say specifically about the types that when it comes to emotional mirroring, sure, all 3 of these types want their emotions mirrored in general, but there tends to be a special penchant for it when it comes to sadness in particular for the 4s, when it comes to fear for the 6, which sometimes gets expressed intellectually because that's a head type, as worry, right? And then finally, anger for the 8s. And I just want to say that, again, part of the gift of this type is they give expression to this part in all of us, right? We all have feelings. Not all of us have felt comfortable expressing it. And I know that sometimes when the emotional realness types have expressed their feelings, I even begin to recognize my own. So this is a gift to all of us that makes our lives more robust, fuller, more real in a sense. And so these types also tend to engage with intensity, right? Of course, they have intensity in all areas, but Fours tend to lean towards greater emotional intensity. Sixes, mental intensity, like almost like mentally not letting go of an idea they want you to have, right? And then eights have this physical intensity where the anger inside can get either expressed or released through action. There's just this facility between like that, like experience inside themselves and the movement toward action. So that's the emotional realness type. I do want to make a note about intensity because I think that a lot of times emotional realness types get a bad rap in this regard. Um, I'm very sensitive to people saying, especially to emotional realness types, that like you're too much or that's too intense, because it's important for us as we do our own inner work to remember that that's not about the other person. That's about I'm experiencing this in a way that's overwhelming to me. That's about owning the experience of intensity in front of me. And intensity is totally subjective, right? Because working with Angela as a sexual aide, I'm actually pretty intense myself. So like I don't experience it as too intense. It just meets my intensity. So just remember that your experience is relative to this person, right? When you're dealing with emotional realness types. So then moving into, it's like almost the other side of the coin, right? The positive outlook types. That's types 2, 7, and 9. Sandra Smith refers to it as the reframing type. So that's additional language that I really like. And the positive outlook types tend to respond to conflict by rigorously avoiding negativity, focusing on a rosy outlook and the best possible outcomes. They tend to be strong in their ability to bring like hope and positivity and inspiration to pretty much any situation. And the detriment is that as they do this, they may come across as too Pollyanna, and thus they're not always taken seriously because of that. And also, when overdone, this positivity, when unchecked, can tend to like overlook or deny negative realities, like the other half of like reality, right? And thus it can actually worsen uh, actual problems that exist in the world because of that unwillingness to really take a good look at that, right? To only focus on the positive and not see the fullness of the situation. And then looking at specific types. First, I want to say, yes, of course, yay for positive outlook types, because like literally they are the yay, they are the cheerleaders of the Enneagram in a way. And I want to also add that there's some confusion about what this means, because even some twos I know are like, I can be kind of critical. So what is this thing about being a positive outlook type? That's a really good question that I get from twos. So okay, I want to take a step back. Just as emotional types can ignore the positives that are there, positive types can ignore the negative feelings, but that doesn't mean it's not there, right? It's just what you emphasize. So, for instance, twos are positive outlook in that they can give you a great pep talk, bring proactive, like a genuine like care and heart to the situation and be a cheerleader for other people. But this positivity that is directed toward the other or the external can actually be an avoidance strategy for not looking at yourself and some of the negative or critical or things that you may not want to look at in yourself, right? As being maybe even part of a potential problem. And so it's not, again, that twos are just positive in that respect. The positivity is directed toward a kind of avoidance of the interior world. So it's very similar to the other positive types, right? Sevens can bring vision, excitement, optimism, but at the expense of facing like painful feelings, right? And really moving through them and not fully recognizing that it's actually going through some of these difficult things that there's a better positive result on the other side. And then finally, yes, nines bring this gift of something about their presence can often bring a calm to other people and slow things down in a way that can bring greater peace to the situation. And nines, with their ability to see many sides, can shows the positive sides of things that others may not be able to see. And at the same time, we recognize there's an avoidance of the nine's own anger sometimes, or an avoidance of facing the conflict of really bringing forth a topic that doesn't feel as positive, right, in the situations. And then finally, the rational competency types. also called containing types by Sandra Smith. That's type 1, 3, and 5. This type responds to conflict by setting emotions aside in favor of functioning, using objectivity, rationality, logic. They're very strong in their ability to like squarely and efficiently face issues and come to speedy resolutions. And if unchecked, this tendency and these types can become overly dismissive of like emotionality and emotion-driven reasoning. And as a result, the negative in this is that we, and I'm included in this type, can come across as cold, even heartless, or lacking empathy. And the truth of it is, in that moment, it is lacking empathy because it's lacking a connection to emotionality and that heart space. So, going over these by type, just a little bit for each type, ones gift us in this with this principle. It's like principles over personalities, kind of objectivity, bringing morality and moral solutions to the situation, right? But at the same time, ones can be challenged by their need for order and thus a certain inflexibility. And so they bring a little rigidity to this, to problem solving, right? And threes can tend to gift a situation with a degree of like competence and even excellence, hard work, and follow through to completion because of the threes need to complete their goals, right? But again, sometimes neglecting the heart and even feeling like the heart or the feelings are in the way of the resolution. And then finally, fives. Fives gift us definitely with this like supreme objectivity, so much knowledge and wisdom. But the five energy into problem solving is missing a vital piece of information. They don't always realize emotional information, right? So that compartmentalizing in order to be objective, like all the emotions go back there, and then so the final solution doesn't include that piece of valuable information. So those are the three conflict styles. I'll review them again: emotional realness, positive outlook, and then rational competency. And what I want to say about this is yes, it might be interesting for you to notice your type, your style, your preferred style. Recognize that we tend to, as human beings, we have access to all three, but the way I like to look at it is that we tend to have a bias toward one. And so when we talk about this being our style, this is our bias, this is our preference. And then on the other hand, we have one that we tend to almost like reject or overly judge and are maybe blind to, like, why is this even important? Is oftentimes the reaction we have to this, to one of the conflict styles. And so in the other thing I want to say is, because the emotional realness types express their emotions, right? Express outward in our society, especially, which tends to be in our Western world more rationally oriented. I think there's this bias against that and a diminishing of the emotional realness as being equally valid. And as if the rational competency were somehow like a higher level of being. And I want to say that from my perspective, all of the conflict styles are a form of reaction, right? What we're talking about is our first, like, instant impulsive reaction to a situation. And so I want to share this teaching from our Saturday class that I offered. When it comes to Enneagram conflict styles, we tend to think of emotional realness, also known as emotional reactivity types, as the only people who are reactive types. Yet, in a sense, all of us react. Sometimes our reaction is to shut down, compartmentalize, or flee from our feelings. One conflict style or way of reacting is not inherently better than any other. I really want to impart this idea that in the wholeness and unity of life, that all are part of the spectrum of our humanity. And in my view, we need all three to fully wholeheartedly meet this moment. I mean, literally, this moment of our shared existence with authenticity, positivity, and capability. And so, how do we move forward from a place of greater wholeness and unity with less reactivity and more responsivity? I'm going to hand it over to Angela to let you know.
So, moving into part three, our invitation this week is to reflect on the conflict style that you tend to repress. What are the gifts there that you did not see before? And start noticing when it shows up in others and your reaction to that. Can you make a space for your internal reaction as you experience it? Maybe even breathe around it. As I think about my primary type, I am a type 8, so that's emotional realness. And when I feel like somebody cannot hold a space for my anger, then I feel like they're not listening, that they don't care about what I'm feeling, and I feel invalidated. So, in order to feel validated, what do? I double down on that emotionality and I get angrier and I pursue the person and I want to resolve the conflict. I can't even move into conflict resolution until that's mirrored back for me, because then I know that I matter. If for some reason that's not working, then I default along my 5 line and I go into that rational competency to try to figure out how can I explain this to them so that they understand where I'm coming from. The repressed part of me is the positive outlook. I tend to think that people who are practicing positive outlook are bypassing the situation. They're not seeing the conflict for what it is in its entirety, which, of course, when I'm reflecting on this, I can see, oh, I have a tendency to maybe focus on the negative emotions while they're focusing on the positive emotions. And so as I notice people showing up with positivity instead of just getting angrier, now I try to take a deep breath and pause, because a big part of my intensity is this moving forward and going fast and wanting to resolve something so I can move into action. So the actual work for me is to do the opposite of that. I backpedal and I slow down, and then I listen for maybe something that they have to offer that I have not considered before because I've been so worked up and angry. So that's an example of how you might practice this invitation. Nhien, I'd love to pass it back to you so that you can share where you're coming from.
Wow, thank you, Angela. So, for me, since I lead with rational competency, I definitely can tell like there's an instant move toward let's fix this. Like that's so instant in me. And historically, the second thing would definitely be like my preference for positive outlook. That we're like, yeah, let's solve the problem. We can do this. You know, like is it really? And then I would be looking at the emotional realness types, I'd be like, what are you doing sobbing in the corner? I wouldn't say that out loud, but I think inside of me, I'm like, get up. Like that was the feeling of like, oh, and being triggered around emotional expression historically, again, not lately, but in my early years, like I really felt like this is indulgent. I even felt like this is selfish, because it's like now you've made me do all the work because I really believed I had to pick up the slack, right? If others were not going to get it. It's almost like, who will help me now if you are here venting over there? That was the belief. And so for me, the integration of my blind conflict style, if you will, is definitely related to emotions, which is, of course, also great for a 3. And the beauty of this practice that has helped me come into my own wholeness is, of course, when I appear to be welcoming the experience of other people's emotions around me, I'm also realizing that I'm now making space, like there's just space for feelings. And then I start to realize, oh, this is actually what being human is. Like that was a revelation for me. And to understand that truly my actions would be hollow or without heart if I didn't incorporate that. And so, yes, I don't think I ever lose my movement toward solving the issue, but now it's like more wholeheartedly. And again, it's a continual practice because I can still feel a little bit of that, if others are emoting in a way where I don't feel like they will stop, like basically. So that's my practice. Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Nhien. So I'm going to close us with a deactivation meditation. But first, I want to share a little bit about the 90-second rule. Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroscientist and author of Whole Brain Living. And she says that there is a 90-second chemical process that happens in our bodies And after that, any emotional response that remains is just the person choosing to stay in that emotional loop. Now, by emotional response, she means our physiological or chemical activation. And the emotional loop is perpetuated by our thoughts or the stories that keep us engaged in that reactivity. Remembering that reactivity are any of the conflict styles: emotional realness, rational competency, and positive outlook. So, keeping this in mind, these stories can also be the source of our activation as well. So they might start the activation or they might keep the activation in a loop. So, in order to kind of be able to be present with the activation and also not be reactive because of it, I have combined Taylor's 90-second rule with Oren J. Sofer's deactivation practice from his book, Say What You Mean. And in this practice, this is a way for us to not say we can't be reactive or we're not going to engage in activation. Instead, it's a recognition that we are automatically going to get reacted by some things. So how can we stay with that and not become reactive? So I invite you to close your eyes or cast your eyes down towards the ground and take a few minutes to just settle your mind and body. Allow your attention to gather with the sensations of just breathing in and breathing out. As you breathe in, notice if you can uh, see the increase in your energy and vitality in your body just by breathing in. This is a subtle and natural form of sympathetic activation. Your heart speeds up a little bit. You have all this extra oxygen stimulating everything. Now, as you breathe out, can you notice any settling or calming or soothing? That is a natural deactivation response to the breath out. Next, I want to invite you to reflect on perhaps an aspect of your repressed conflict style, an element of it that perhaps activates you whenever you are in conflict, when somebody else is bringing that into the situation. As you begin to focus on that, notice the physiological effects of activation in your nervous system. Your heart might be racing. You might be feeling a clench in your gut. Maybe your shoulders go back and your spine becomes rigid. Perhaps you feel like you even want to pull away or disassociate. Now, if you can, see if you can put the story aside and simply allow yourself to feel the activation in your body as a pure sympathetic response. Stay with the chemical reaction and let go of the story. And I am going to time us for 90 seconds. If you find that the story comes back into your mind, simply allow it to go, to flow away, and return to the simple activation in your body. Now, gently turn your attention back to a neutral reference point, whether that's your feet on the ground or your seat in the chair, perhaps the sounds and smells around you. As the arousal in your body dissipates, pay close attention to any deactivation in your body, any settling or loosening or calming down, even in just the change of your breath. This is a very simple meditation that you can use anytime through the week, especially as you practice noticing when you're getting activated. It may take only 90 seconds to deactivate your reactions and give you time to choose a response instead.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Angela. See you all next week.